Okay, good evening, folks. Dr. John Taylor Kent here. It's time for cookies and milk. As you can tell, I like strong drinks, so it's evaporated milk. Yeah, I know I probably should get regular milk, or shouldn't drink it at all. Some of you have been posting that. I know it's not the normal thing to be doing, but I've got it. Look, it's the 11th of October. It's evening time. Pretty close to my bedtime. What I want to tell you about is who the chosen people are not. And let me put it this way. The Jews are not the chosen people. We're going to start off with that one. Now, let me be a little bit more specific, or should I say non-specific, and spread it out a little bit. The Jews are not one race. I don't even know if they're one religion. I don't think so. But it's kind of a hodgepodge, and it's mixed up like most of the rest of the planet. Most of us are mixed to a certain extent. You'll say, well, it says in the Bible, blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you. Who's it talking about? Who are they talking to at that point in Genesis? Well, they're talking about Abraham. Abraham was not a Jew. There were no Jews during the time of Abraham. There were no Jews during the time of Moses. Now, what may be said rightfully about Moses is he was a Hebrew because he spoke the Hebrew language, meaning he was descendant of Heber or Eber. You drop the H on that. So he was a descendant of Eber, like all of the Hebrews were descendants of Eber. So, and they threw a couple of wild things at us by calling us anti-Semitic or Semitic or Semites. What's a Semite? A Semite is a classification of language. Indo-European languages are Semitic languages. They have similar roots, similar origins. So when they give you this bullshit about being anti-Semitic, it's just that, it's bullshit. They don't define it. We just make the assumptions and they just go with the assumptions. So Abraham and his seed were blessed. Who did Abraham's children become? Well, if we read the book of Genesis, we find out that, we had a few people in the lineage, if you will. Isaac and Rebekah. And I can't keep it all straight. There's a lot of parallel construction. And I haven't been talking about this in a while, so I don't have it straight in my own mind. But I'll try to give it to you as best I can. Isaac was basically Jacob's father. Who was Jacob? Jacob became known as Israel. So the Israelites were all descendants of the man Israel. And when you look at it carefully, you realize that he had 4 wives. So whenever anybody asks you, well, does the Bible support, multiple marriages? Yeah. Even David thanks Yahweh God for his wives and his concubines. Both, by the way. Consider those a blessing from God. So, I know that's a little disturbing for some of you, the idea of 4 wives. By the way, the ideal number of wives for a Muslim man is also 4. The Hebrew religion, if you will, or the Hebrew tradition, if you will, is very similar to the Ishmaelite or Muslim tradition in that there were 12 boys. Israel had 12 boys, and Ishmael had 12 boys as well. That became 12 dukes. And they're mentioned in the Bible before Israel and his boys are. So Israel had 2 women for wife. He had Leah and Rachel. And with each one of his daughters, Laban, his uncle, included the nursemaid, if you will, the handmaid, so the servant, if you want to go that far. And each one of those two women, and competing for their husband's affection and to be favored and to have children, gave their midwives or handmaidens or slaves, whatever you want to call them, the ones that dad had assigned to go with them, to their husbands for wives as well, to have children by them, to give them children, to continue on with that competition of who was going to give him the most sons and all that. So he had 12 sons, and the youngest one was Benjamin. And there was one daughter in there too. And then Joseph, who was sold off into slavery, ended up with 2 sons himself, Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh was compared to Judah in terms of his physical strength and genetics. And Jacob, who became known as Israel, adopted Joseph's 2 sons as his own. So when you add it up, there's actually 13 tribes. Now you've got a book called The 13th Tribe. This is written by another Jewish man. And he basically was pointing out the farce of those people from Khazaria who called themselves Jews. They were Turkish Mongolian. They were not descendants of Israel the man. They didn't come out of the promised land at all. However, they intermixed with Esau's descendants. Esau became known as Edom, which means red. And so they went up from Mount Seir, also called Mount Edom in southern Israel, and they went up to help the Khazarians convert to their newfound faith, to Judaism. It's around 700 AD. That's not when the real mistake happened. That's just when the Khazarian mafia had its roots. It's the sociopathic culture. You know what a sociopath is, don't you? I doubt it. Even psychologists fail to agree on what a sociopath is. And it's not in the books. It's not a formal diagnosis. But they're the ones that rule the world today. They're willing to do things no other group was willing to do. They're willing to kill their own kind to get to where they want. From my understanding, it was those people that actually ran the doggone concentration camps in Germany against their other fellow Jews. They were willing to kill them. Yeah, that's the secret they don't want you to know. There were 2 different groups. Don't believe me? Go dig up the transfer agreement by Edwin Black. You can read about both groups. You can read the names of the leaders, and you can see where the bad guys murdered the hell out of the good guys so they could get power. So they're the ones that rule the world today. There's a lot more to it than that. This is the simplest way I can get it to you, because the Bible does tell you, truthfully, who the bad guys are. And from it, you should be able to recognize yourself as being, hopefully, one of the good guys. So, the Jews were not chosen, but they sure go around saying they're the chosen ones. And worse than that, they got dumbass Christians saying they're the chosen ones too. If you bothered to read the Bible for yourself, you'd realize what I'm telling you is the truth. Now, the error that caused problems was before the birth of Christ. About the year 143 BC, John Hyrcanus prevailed during the Maccabean revolt, and he offered the enemy a deal which they could not refuse. Otherwise, he was going to kill them if they didn't go along with his offer. His offer was, get yourself circumcised. My God, talk about being hung up on circumcision. Get yourself circumcised, convert to Judaism, and worship the one true God, and I'll let you live. And why was that such a bad idea? I mean, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, doesn't it sound like one of those liberal programs that sounds so good, but in reality, not so good? Well, by the time Yahshua, who you want to call Jesus, by the time he come about, was born, probably about I think it was 3 BC, September 4th. I don't remember the exact date or anything. September 24th. I don't remember those things because there's been so much conjecture that I get confused with all those simple facts. Anyway, it certainly wasn't Christmas Day that we have today in December. And it coincided with the Feast of Tabernacles. It's important to remember that that was given to us by Yahweh to be celebrated in perpetuity, forever, for a reason, because big things happened on that day. Big things happened. Yahshua was born, for one. We're also told to celebrate the Passover in perpetuity, forever. Why? Because a lot of good things happened on that too. And so these are important dates because they help us to remember what happened, what we went through. So, by the time Herod the Great is in charge of Israel, the Romans have made him governor over Israel. Herod the Great was an Idumean. You may say, what? What's an Idumean? Idumean is a Greek word for Edomite, meaning descendant of Esau. He was in charge by the time Yahshua came around, and he's the guy that ordered the murder of all male children in that Bethlehem region, age 2 and under. And as the prophet said centuries earlier, that the mothers would be crying out for the loss of their sons. I'm trying to give this to you straight up, and there really is a lot to it. And if you've gotten this far, that's pretty good. You know, it took me a long time to learn this stuff myself. I'm still learning more stuff, still sorting things out. I run into people that teach me all the time, and I'm real grateful for that. And as you can tell, there's nothing more I like talking about than the truth that's in the Bible. Why is that? Because it's a lot different than what they've been preaching from the pulpits. Matter of fact, Isaiah wrote about the lying pastors centuries ago. And Isaiah didn't even have pastors back when he was alive. They had priests. So he was ahead of the day, ahead of the game, writing about today's pastors. In my estimation, by 1850, all the seminaries had been taken over by the evil ones, and the Bible translators, for the most part, had been infiltrated, and there had been a lot of errors purposely put into the Bible. In translation, things being screwed up in terms of order. Some real throw-offs things. Like they took the name of Yahweh out of the Bible, which is why you want my Bible. We put the name Yahweh in where it belongs. And even when you have that name in where it belongs, you still have a lot to sort out. It just makes things easier. It's a more accurate translation into modern English. It's easier to read. It's far more accurate. And you will find yourself making fewer wrong assumptions based upon the text, like you would make wrong assumptions based upon the original King James and the Old English. So, yeah, I want you to go buy my Bible. Links down below in the description. That's how you support my channel. That way I'm giving you more value than you're giving me. So, here we are in present day. And Yahshua gave us some tips. Y'all think he's going to stay on the hillside picking flowers. Well, he picked a fight. The week before his death, or the week of it. And he went into the temple and he formed a whip from ropes. He made a whip and he used it on the money changers, and he upset their displays, their carts, if you will, their tables. And he cursed them out and yelled at them about turning his father's house of worship, which is supposed to be a house of prayer, they turned it into a den of thieves because they were changing money and they were charging people for pigeons and stuff for offerings. So they were selling all this stuff. They were merchandisers right there in the temple court. Within a week, they had targeted his butt for extermination, and they took action. So there's one of your tips. He didn't like the money changers. Another tip comes from the Apostle John in the book that he took in dictation on the island of Patmos. He was about 80 years of age at the time, and apparently Yahshua appeared to him and dictated the book of Revelations to him, and he wrote it down. And we have what's called a double witness in the Bible, which means it's in there twice, which means pay attention to this. Yahweh, Creator, God, Father, wants you to learn this. So we have the famous lines in Revelations 2:9, chapter 2, verse 9, and 3:9, chapter 3, verse 9. It's pretty easy to remember. And if you move ahead to 4:9, there's a little bit of an echo of the same theme. What is that theme? Yahshua is speaking and says, I know you who say you are Judeans or Jews and are not. And one of those says, but I shall make you of the synagogue of Satan. And the other one says, but are of the synagogue of Satan. So you've got another clue given to you. We have those who claim to be Jews who are not Jews. And if you look around, you'll see that there are atheistic Jews. And if you look around far enough, you'll see there's a bunch of them that are bankers on top of that. Those are your Edomites. They own the planet and run the planet. Oh, they own you and me because they take our birth certificates and turn us into bond slaves through a bunch of frauds on those things. So that's what's happening right now. Is you and I are bond slaves. We aren't living in the land of the free, home of the brave. I hope I'm not giving it to you too fast here, and I want you to remember this. So, Abraham was chosen. Abraham and his seed, his children, were chosen. And his children were going to be like the sands of the shore or the stars of the sky, star people, without number. And he started a bunch of nations. All of the European nations came from Israel. And the English-speaking nations on top of that. And in case you're wondering why you're called white, is because our keepers don't want us to know that where we come from. They don't want you to understand things. So what they're trying to obscure is your memory of the past and your identification, your roots. They don't want us to call ourselves Caucasians. Why is that? Because if you knew you were Caucasian instead of just white, you might ask, where did we come from? How did we get named Caucasian? We're named after the Caucasus mountain range. Generally speaking, about 722 BC, the Assyrians began the invasions of the northern part of Israel. And they did 3 big campaigns, and the last 2 might have been considered somewhat incursions, if you will. So some people like to count 4 invasions, Some people 3 invasions. Depends on how you want to read the Bible and how you want to look at it. And the landmarks are in the Bible, repeated about 5 times, and they're all landmarks south of the Caucasus Mountain Range. So you and I are called Caucasians because, generally speaking, our ancestors bolted across the Caucasus Mountains at a pass called the Darrell Pass, upon the walls of which, chiseled in ancient Hebrew language, Paleo-Hebrew, are the words, the gates of Israel. It's about little over 13,000 feet. We came through those passes. Some went around the mountains, some left by ship, some left from Egypt by ship, went straight north. That's where those civilizations came from. And then some left before we even went to Egypt. Yeah, Zerah and his 5 boys didn't go to Egypt. One of them founded Troy. Another one ended up on Ireland, northern side of Ireland. And his descendants later on remarried into the family, if you will. And that's another story for another day. But basically the line of Zerah and the line of Pharez married, and the crown switched positions. The low branch became high, the high branch became low. And the 2 twins, their children, if you will, merged in marriage at that point. And that's when Jeremiah chased the snakes out of Ireland. Jeremiah did a lot more than that. He came to the Americas, by the way. Yeah, he sure did. He went to what they called the wilderness at the time. I think he brought the Ark of the Covenant over here. Not sure about that, but that's what I think. In case you're wondering, Solomon sent ocean-going ships out to the New World. It was a 2-year trip to go out over here and to go back. As a matter of fact, Solomon had mines for copper and gold up around the Great Lakes. Yeah. So, if the Jews aren't the chosen people, who are the chosen people? Well, in the Old Testament, I don't remember the exact book, passage, or any of that, Yahweh makes an announcement. He says, I shall make a new covenant with the same people with whom I made the old covenant. And that new covenant became the Christian faith. I have mixed feelings about the name of it because Yahshua never called it Christianity, nor did the apostles call it Christianity. Yahshua called it the faith of our fathers twice. If it's good enough for him, it's definitely good enough for me. And the apostles, and even Yahshua himself, also did refer to it as the way, because you worked out your salvation by proceeding upon the way. And that's the whole purpose of those 10 commandments, to guide us so we can have blessings and lead a better life. In many cases, just live. Because you steal from someone back then and they'd flat out kill you. So the chosen people are the Caucasian descendants of Israel. I know you're going to say, hold on. I've seen pictures of Jesus. He had dark skin. He was swarthy. He had long brown locks, tresses. Bullshit. That was modeled after the sons of one of the popes. Yahshua had short hair, which was the style for a man to wear back then. And we have 2 eyewitness descriptions of Yahshua. And each one, he's described as having blonde hair. I don't have blonde hair. And he's described as having blue eyes. I don't have blue eyes. Yeah, boys and girls, they lied to us. Lie to us every which way they can. Open your minds, open your hearts. Open your mind up to new thinking. Be willing to have a little bit of flexibility in your thinking so you can get to the truth. And hopefully understand it, because your life may depend upon it. So today, most of the Christians are running around claiming the Jews are the chosen ones. No, they're not. And then I hear about the FBI complaining that white supremacism is the biggest danger in the country. Look, the only supremacism I hear is Jewish supremacism. I don't hear any white supremacism. I hear a bunch of white people that want to survive and want their children to have equal opportunities, which are denied because of the racism in the country. And there is racism in the country. It is systemic, and it's the law of the land. Isn't that asinine? By law, you've got to discriminate against white men in particular. It's not that you have a choice. You have to. That's got to be the policy. Or you have to show something in writing as to why you had to hire a pasty old white guy instead of hiring one of these fine specimens. Or a woman. So if you really want to even the playing field, you get rid of that income tax. You get rid of the 14th and 15th Amendments. You get rid of the civil rights. You don't make one person worth more than the other. You get rid of all of those equal opportunity, whatever that bullshit is that's required, where you have to record a person's gender and race and keep track of all that crap. I mean, if you really want to be neutral, you don't even need to put that down on the damn application. So why the hell do you have to specify your damn race on an application? What business is it of theirs? Shouldn't you just get the job based upon merit, upon abilities, mastery, demonstrated achievements and mastery? And if you get rid of the IRS, there's no more nonprofit organizations. And that truly does level the playing field, because then you don't have to adhere to rules and regulations that the other son of a bitch doesn't have to adhere to. He doesn't get hobbled by them like you are. By trying to force equal outcomes, it's inherently unequal. It's horrible. Hey, I identify as a basketball player. I want to make $12, $13 million a year for just sitting on the bench, warming the bench up. I mean, why not give that to me, right? I could be your token white guy. Yeah. $13 million a year. Oh, heck yeah. Oh, which reminds me, there's no money. Don't kid yourselves. The bankers stole it all. They give you this fiat stuff, debt-based notes, which require you to have war, perpetual war. If you had real money, a wealth-based currency, like gold and silver, like specified in the Constitution in writing, then you don't have to go to war. But what we have requires us to go to war. So that's what we're doing in the Ukraine, making money for the banksters. And these politicians are making so much off it, it's not funny. I mean, it's so damn corrupt that it wouldn't matter which one you lynch, you'd probably be self-defense for the country, to be honest with you. It's so corrupt, I think it's beyond salvation. I don't think you can be saved. We are so far away from our roots and from having a democracy, leave alone a republic, that it's not going to happen again. I think one of the nicest things that could happen would be the collapse of this fiat financial system, and the people hopefully have the wisdom to say, hey, we're going back to coin gold and silver. and then go after all these people that have done all these frauds to us and been stealing it from us for a long time. You know, Rothschild, who was known as Bauer before that, all these bankers, and then some of these politicians whose parents did some pretty famous stuff, especially Jacob Schiff, Adam Schiff's ancestor. He's the one that started World War One. Yeah, he did. He visited Taft, and upon leaving the office, he said, "Gentlemen, this means war." He made the announcement, and they did World War One. So, you've been taken over by a bunch of damn parasites. They're illegally occupying the country. They rule you with admiralty law, laws of the oceans. They rule you with interstate commercial code. You're not under the Constitution. You got no rights. They've used a series of frauds and a bunch of weird contracts. I can't think of the proper name for them right now. Adhesion contracts? It's like when they passed that Patriot Act, it referred to other laws like 2 or 3 levels away. I tell you, whoever wrote that Patriot Act ought to be strung up. That was treason if there ever was treason. Whoever voted for it, yeah. I still don't know what to make of Lincoln. He did get us through that period, but at great price. He basically ruined the Republic. The Jeffersonian Republic was ruined by Abraham Lincoln. So I would have to say we haven't had a republic since then. There were other things before that caused it to be ruined. And the 17th Amendment is the worst thing possible because it runs contrary to the Constitution. By having the direct election of senators, you deprive the state governments of being represented. It was the state governments that were the parties of the Constitution that signed off and formed and authorized the central government. If those Supreme Court justices can't figure that one out, they're not worth the powder to blow them to hell. One of my mother's favorite sayings. Other than, I'm going to give you kids a bunch of razor blades and let you go out and play in the streets. That was another one of her great sayings. Yeah, Mom was a trip. Yeah. I miss her. But if I had a choice, I'd choose my paternal grandmother over her to have lunch with and have a conversation with. She had a college education in 1917. Yeah. She had a college education and she married a man with a 6th grade education. 6th grade education back then was some sort of education. Our education system wasn't screwed up like it is today. Look, I realize I'm past the 33-minute mark, so I'm going to bow out right now. I just wanted to go over with you so you would have an understanding as to who the players are today. So we have the guys, and I didn't go all the way back, so I better cut to the chase right now. Basically, the fallen angels got together and conspired, and what their conspiracy was, hey man, these women look good. Man, the daughters of these men, they're hot. Let's go into them all. Let's do them all. So they took all of them that they wanted for wives. You have to remember, wife didn't involve a license back then. And, it did involve a ceremony. And the consummation of that was the breaking of the hymen, and it was basically a blood oath, if you will. Anyway, what happened was that there were 5 leaders of the fallen angels, and one of them was named Gadriel. And Gadriel is the one that seduced Eve, and as a result, fathered Cain. Cain killed his half-brother Abel, murdered him, got kicked out of the garden, went east to the land of Nod, the land of wanderers. And from there he took wives and founded cities. And you're going to say, well, my God, if everybody came from Adam, they couldn't have been any people outside the garden. Well, there were. You know, the people outside the garden were different. And so this man, who was a hybrid himself, half Adamic DNA and half fallen satanic devil's DNA, took Mongolian wives, Mongoloids. One pastor says, likes to call them Chinamen. So his children were half Asiatic, 1/4 Caucasoid, and 1/4 Freakazoid fallen devil. And they went into the land of Canaan. And they settled there. They became the people of the land. And God told the people, his family, his children, do not. 5 times he tells them this in the Bible. Do not take their daughters for wives for your sons. Don't do it. And do not give your daughters for wives for their sons. Do not intermarry with this group that's got the satanic DNA in it. So with that in mind, if you're a woman, I will ask you, what was the original sin? Oh, I know you want to immediately say it was Adam. That's okay. Ask the men, what was the original sin? They want to immediately say it was Eve. Man, the enemy knows how to divide us up so they can conquer us. The original sin was those 200 fallen angels conspiring on Mount Hermon to do this to the daughters of men. And as a result, we've got Gadriel's child, Cain, and his descendants that are owning the place today and running it. Now, before we go too far and you jump to conclusions, you know, there's just a few that got mainstreamed into the Jews proper. And they ended up going up to Caesarea, and they tainted that group. But think about it. The majority of those, which became known as Ashkenazi Jews, aren't satanic DNA beings, okay? Just makes sense that way. But you need to understand, when we talk about the fight between good and evil, the battle between good and evil, the war between good and evil, it's real. It's not a strictly spiritual war. The enemy knows who we are, and they know who they are. They are fighting, they're waging unlimited warfare. They do biological, nuclear, radiation, chemical, electromagnetic radiation. Even sound is used as a weapon. At this point, they gave us the wrong frequencies, and it was done purposely. They turned everything into a weapon they could, and really have screwed up this planet at this point. So, now that you know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, don't go out there and try to separate them and identify them too readily, because you can't do it. Cain was just 1 out of 200 fallen angels. Cain was the descendant of 1 out of 200 fallen angels. You still got another 199 to go track down. So there's quite a bit of them out there. There's more than what we're ever really going to figure out readily. So when it talks in the New Testament about an enemy sowed tares among the wheat, basically that's about those fallen angels impregnating these women they found so fair. And that gave birth to the men of renown, to some of the weirdos, some of the giants. Some interesting things. All right. I think I've given you enough, and this is going up on Dr. John Taylor Kent rather than Awakening Israel. I'd like to put more up on Awakening Israel. I'm just not getting enough views there. So I'm going to populate this channel with more views, keeping the other channel for the time in which I make the mistake and cross the line. YouTube doesn't tell us much in advance when we're going to do something wrong. Oh, they do about the event of 2020. I made that mistake and I couldn't post for a week. Actually, they just told me, oh, they gave me a warning and I appealed it. And because I had the audacity to appeal it, they decided to consequent one of my channels for a full week. So click on the link down below. Go buy my Bible. Start reading it. Learn the history. You need to know the book of Genesis inside and out. Then you need to move on to the next books. You need to learn the 10 Commandments. You need to learn the curses for disobedience and the blessings for obedience. And do your best to live by those. That is how you work out your salvation. And don't give me this stuff that they preach in the big box churches that it's given and you just have to say some hocus pocus formula and magically you're saved. No, you have to be a member of the covenants first. And if you're watching this, you're probably a member of the covenants. So you have to be a party of it. And then on top of that, it's my belief, you've got to develop that one-on-one relationship with Yahshua. And you do that by reading the Bible to access the mind of Creator, Father, God, Yahweh, and then doing your best to make the best decisions. And then you get rewarded. And the rewards are really, really nice. Read about the blessings and then read about those curses because it's a blessing to avoid those curses. May Yahweh bless America. Over and out.